This is a Fox News alert. I'm Brett Baer in Washington. U.S. officials confirmed to Fox News that Russian hackers, possibly directly tied to the Russian government, hacked into State Department and White House computers. While the incident is not new, the suspected identity of the culprit is. What did they get access to, and how does this happen? Correspondent Rich Edson has the latest. Good evening, Rich.
Good evening, Brett. Concerns over Russian cyber capabilities as reports hackers accessed the White House computer system, providing them access to President Obama's schedule and planned policy announcements. The report says the hackers are believed to be working for the Russian government. The administration says that report is referring to an already disclosed incident from last year. Officials refuse to acknowledge any Russian connection.
We don't confirm cyber intrusions. We've spoken to the fact that there was an event last year. We have classified systems that are secure, and we take regular precautions to secure our unclassified networks as well. We don't talk about where cyber intrusions originate from because we're constantly taking actions to prevent them.
A well-placed cyber intelligence source tells Fox News that these reports are alluding to Russian-based hacking reported in October in an operation called Operation Pawn Storm. And Russian hackers are also suspected as the culprits behind a recent cyber attack on the State Department's computer system, one that forced officials to spend months trying to clean it up. Of late, administration officials have acknowledged growing concerns over Russia's cyber capabilities and intentions.
Attacks against us are increasing in frequency, scale, sophistication, and severity of impact. Although we must be prepared for a catastrophic large-scale strike, a so-called cyber Armageddon, the reality is that we've been living with a constant and expanding barrage of cyber attacks for some time.
The well-placed cyber source adds Fox News that the hacking efforts out of Russia intensified around the time the U.S. ratcheted up sanctions against the Putin regime. Brett.
Yeah, the State Department shut down its computers March 13th, just 3 weeks ago, for apparently an incident. Meantime, Rich, this news about the Russian hack comes on a day that a lot of Washington, D.C. and surrounding areas were hit with a short power outage. At first, it was raising all kinds of red flags about cyber attacks, but it wasn't related to any attack. What can you tell us about that?
No, that's right, Brett. This was on a day that official Washington had to negotiate much of its afternoon without power. A scattershot outage hit several government agencies throughout the area, abruptly halting the State Department briefing and forcing spokeswoman Marie Harf to continue fielding reporters' questions by smartphone light. Officials point to a downed transmission line in Maryland and say there is no indication this is a result of malicious activity. Though, Brett, all this while experts continue to warn officials here of this country's cyber and infrastructure vulnerabilities.
Yeah, it's one worth following. Rich, thank you. Meanwhile, the Pentagon says there are now 2 Russian Navy ships operating off U.S. shores. U.S. Northern Command's Admiral Bill Gortney says a second ship has recently come up from Venezuela. He says they are intelligence-gathering vessels. Now there are two official GOP candidates. Today, Kentucky Senator Rand Paul officially declared his run for the presidency, a campaign that will clearly be an effort to balance his vision of Tea Party libertarianism with the practical necessity of appealing to the Republican mainstream. And on day one of the Paul campaign, he's already fighting off an attack from within his own party. Chief political correspondent Carl Cameron has the story from Louisville tonight.
I announce, with God's help, with the help of liberty lovers everywhere, that I am putting myself forward as a candidate for President of the United States of America.
An eye doctor turned politician, Republican Kentucky Senator Rand Paul made official his long-awaited presidential bid, emphasizing the self-styled libertarian brand of conservatism, he says, will expand and change the GOP by appealing to minority and younger voters.
This message of liberty is for all Americans, Americans from all walks of life. It's time for a new way, a way predicated on justice, opportunity, and freedom.
But hawks say Paul's weak on foreign policy. A conservative super PAC welcomed him into the campaign with an attack ad.
Rand Paul supports Obama's negotiations with Iran, and he doesn't understand the threat.
Paul aides call that ad false and say he opposes a nuclear Iran.
Any deal between the U.S. and Iran must be approved by Congress.
But amid the right's criticism, Paul's modified some of his positions and no longer opposes all foreign aid, and in recent months abandoned his demand that the U.S. slash defense spending. In fact, he now wants more.
I envision an America with a national defense unparalleled, undefeatable, and unencumbered by overseas nation building.
The Paul campaign welcomes the conservative criticism as evidence that he is a serious top-tier candidate who poses a threat to entrenched GOP establishment interests.
We've come to take our country back from the special interests.
Paul's also taking heat from the left. Liberal billionaire environmental activist Tom Steyer is dispatching protesters to Paul's first official campaign stops as a candidate. He'll visit New Hampshire, South Carolina, Iowa, Nevada, and California in the next 5 days. And American Bridge, the liberal super PAC doing opposition research for Hillary Clinton's nascent campaign, launched a webpage named pauloffthewall.com, mocking him for extreme positions. Former Florida Governor Jeb Bush took the high road.
Libertarianism definitely has a place in the GOP. We all share a common belief that we need to limit government's power.
Texas Senator and Tea Party darling Ted Cruz praised Paul, writing, quote, "His entry into the race will no doubt raise the bar of competition, help make us all stronger, and ultimately ensure that the GOP nominee is equipped to beat Hillary Clinton." South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham says Paul would be worse than Hillary Clinton on foreign policy and has told insiders that a big part of his own White House run is aimed at rebutting Paul. Senator Paul is a contrarian in a Republican Party that he wants to reshape and lead. It's often said that a presidential candidate's best campaign day is the one on which they announce. Mr. Paul's rivals were fairly cordial today. That is not going to last. Brett?
Definitely. Carl Cameron in Louisville. Carl, thanks. President Obama is ripping a potential Republican presidential candidate tonight for his criticism of the impending nuclear deal with Iran. But the president is facing growing opposition to his legacy initiative from within his own Democratic Party. Here's Chief White House correspondent Ed Henry.
President Obama's sales pitch on the Iran deal took more hits today, as critics got new grist from the president telling NPR the Iranians could have the capability to build a nuclear bomb after the first 13 years of the deal.
What is a more relevant fear would be that in year 13, 14, 15, they have advanced centrifuges that can enrich uranium fairly rapidly. And at that point, the breakout times would have shrunk almost down to zero.
Aides were left scrambling to clarify what the president meant.
It's my understanding that he was referring to, even though it was a little muddled in the words, to a scenario in which there was no deal.
Then there's trouble from top Democrats like Senator Chuck Schumer, who rejected the president's pitch that lawmakers avoid support for a bipartisan bill sponsored by Republican Bob Corker and Democrat Bob Menendez that would give Congress an up or down vote on the Iran deal. Schumer, in line to replace Senate Minority Leader Harry Reid, declared in a statement, quote, "I strongly believe Congress should have the right to disapprove any agreement, and I support the Corker bill, which would allow that to occur." Two sources close to Reid tell Fox he is also leaning toward supporting the Corker bill, which could help guarantee critics have a veto-proof majority of 67 votes.
How can you say the sales pitch is working?
I'm saying that the sales pitch is just beginning, and that there's ample reason why individuals who take a close look at this agreement can conclude that this is clearly the best way for us preventing Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon.
In the NPR interview, the president also took a poke at Republican Scott Walker for saying if he's elected president, he'll revoke the Iranian deal on day one of his administration.
It would be a foolish approach to take, and you know, perhaps Mr. Walker, after he's taken some time to bone up on foreign policy, will feel the same way.
Walker responded with a fundraising pitch off the president's comments and declared, quote, whether it is cutting a bad deal with Iran, calling ISIS the JV squad, or touting Yemen as a success story, Obama's lack of leadership has hurt America's safety and standing in the world. Meanwhile, after using the National Prayer Breakfast in February to mention that Christians attacked Muslims during the Crusades, today at the Easter Prayer Breakfast, the president added this.
I have to say that sometimes when I listen to less than loving expressions by Christians, I get concerned. But that's a topic for another day.
Now, when I pressed Ernest on Iran, he said the breakout window currently is 2 to 3 years. Then he clarified it's actually 2 to 3 months. They hope the deal extends it to a year. Brett?
Ed Henry live on the North Lawn. Ed, thank you. We are learning more tonight about the circumstances that led to Sergeant Bo Bergdahl's 5-year captivity by the Taliban, a captivity that ended in a trade for 5 senior terrorist leaders. Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge tells us what she's hearing tonight. Good evening, Catherine.
Brett, two sources, one intelligence and the other military, came forward after the desertion charges were filed against Sergeant Bo Bergdahl last month. They tell Fox News that a 2009 investigation by the Naval Criminal Investigative Service, or NCIS, reviewed Bergdahl's computer, interviewed his squad mates, as well as Afghans working outside the wire on a construction project. The intelligence source, who was on the ground when Bergdahl disappeared, says investigators found documentation of Bergdahl's apparent intent to travel to Uzbekistan, as well as multiple searches on his laptop for Russian organized crime. The data also indicated that while on guard duty, Bergdahl made contact with an Afghan who spoke some English to apparently lay the groundwork to meet up after leaving the base. A leaked military report from the day Bergdahl disappeared, posted by WikiLeaks last year, lends credence to the allegation. It says communications known as LLVI, or low-level voice intercepts, such as cell phone or radio traffic, reported, quote, that an American soldier with a camera is looking for someone who speaks English. There was no comment today from the Army or Bergdahl's lawyer Eugene Fidel, and the White House offered little.
I'm very reluctant to weigh in on this, and it's because there are sensitive issues related to the chain of command and the military code of justice. So there's an ongoing investigation by the Army into this specific matter. So I'm very reluctant, as the spokesperson for the Commander-in-Chief, to weigh in on this matter.
Outside analysts believe the new information may form part of the most serious charge against Bergdahl, that is misbehavior before the enemy, Brett.
Catherine, thank you.
You're welcome.
Follow this. Up next, is China's global outreach dangerously growing while we're looking the other way? First years of some of our Fox affiliates around the country are covering tonight. Fox 32 in Chicago with a plane crash that killed 7 people in central Illinois. Among them, 2 members of Illinois State University's athletics department. Deputy Athletic Director Aaron Leach and Associate Head Basketball Coach Tori Ward. Both were returning from the NCAA basketball tournament in Indianapolis. Fox 25 in Boston, where jurors are deliberating the fate of former New England Patriots player Aaron Hernandez. Hernandez's lawyer admitted for the first time today during closing arguments that his client witnessed the shooting death of Odin Lloyd, but blamed 2 others for Lloyd's death. And this is a live look at San Francisco, the Golden Gate Bridge there from our affiliate Fox 2. The big story there tonight, much needed rain and snow coming down in the drought-stricken state. However, forecasters say today's storm will do little to help alleviate what California's governor calls the worst drought in decades. That's tonight's live look outside the Beltway from Special Report. We'll be right back.